International Linguistics Olympiad Sample Problem number 7. This is the last of the easy set of problems. Let's go in. So here we see Persian. So, a lot of these languages you're going to see are some, very small, mostly unknown languages, many with only a few thousand speakers in the world, but Persian is one of the world's major languages. It could even be, some proportion of the people who are taking this exam are, going to be familiar with Persian. So that would certainly make things a lot easier. Although if you do know this language, you just have to watch out for some of the details, like maybe the exact way you spell things in this. This is a Romanization or a conversion of Persian to the Roman alphabet. So if you really think you know the answer automatically, there may be a few little tricks to watch out for. But that's just how it is with the IOL, that you may get lucky if you know some of these other languages, and that may give you a little bonus on one or two of the questions. But here we go, assuming that in most cases, as in it's going to be almost all the time, you're really not going to know anything about the language. So you go in, it might as well be Martian. It could be just a completely unknown language. So let's go in. Well, I could also note that Persian is also a language related to English very distantly, part of the Indo-European family. So there is still a chance that you might find, some little clue somewhere. But assuming we're all completely new here, let's go in. So first, to skim what is being asked for, get a clear idea here. So yes, phrases and translations. Okay, so this is one of the basic types of Linguistics Olympiad puzzles. It's the most common type. They call them the Rosetta Stone style of puzzles. So you have this, you can imagine this as being a little Rosetta Stone in which you have these sentences in the mystery language and then these English translations. And you figure out the patterns and then you do some more translations based on what you've learned. Interesting note here, explain your solution. Typically, there's a lot of gray area there because, usually you don't. I mean, especially at the invitational or the open level, like the first level of these Olympiads, well, at least in the North American version. I know that in the North American Olympiad, the NACLO, the open edition, the first edition, is kind of multiple choice and short answer only. And then it's only at the invitational, the second level, at which you actually have to explain yourself in any way. So this adds a lot of complexity and a lot of different ways you can go. But let's just see what the solution is first, and then you just try to explain it in the simplest possible way. But going in, there's nothing else here, right? We just have sentences in the mystery language in English, and the only questions are, translate these extra sentences into English, and then you translate back. They're not making you do the whole sentence, just a missing piece. Okay. So this is the same procedure that you get for all of these Rosetta Stone puzzles. And, you just look through, you're looking for any pattern, right? You're looking for that first foothold or handhold or that first piece that you can grab onto, because it starts with a whole bunch of seemingly just a bunch of random sounds, right? These random words. And as soon as you get that first piece of something that makes sense, then you can use that as leverage to start opening up the next piece and so on, what I call the cascade. Okay, so with a cascade where after that initial piece becomes clear, then it leads to the next one and the next one until everything sort of reveals itself. And that's the pleasure of solving a puzzle like this, the most pleasant moment. Okay, but now, after all that intro, we see what's going on, and now we dive in to the data set, because this is where all the answers lie. We have 8 sentences, and so, of course, start by looking at the English translations. We're looking for any patterns that repeat. So you'll see this is a theme that comes up again and again whenever you're deciphering, if you're cracking codes like in cryptography, or if you're trying to decipher a mystery message. Looking for repetitions. Repetitions are your way in very often. And that's why you see even in cryptography, it's so important to have random numbers, because so everything there's no way to predict. There's no repetition of any kind, as soon as something repeats, it's like you then have some leverage that you can use to get some clue about what's going on. So, repeating bits here. So what we notice by the form of these, well, they're not sentences, they're noun phrases. They're nothing but noun phrases, so that's a good thing to see. There's no verbs here at all. Okay, what we see here we have nouns followed by these preposition phrases, right? So you have here, it's the something, under the something, that's for all of them, except for this is the something on the something in the something. Interesting how this one ends up being 3 pieces. These are all the something under the something. But this one, the something on the something in the something. Longer, 3 pieces instead of 2, or three nouns instead of 2. And yet, over here, it looks pretty similar. It doesn't stand out as looking like it's longer, so that's unexpected. But okay, now, well, one thing we can see just from seeing that, one thing that immediately stands out. You see here how almost every. Okay, this is interesting. Now here we see, so this word under, okay, so the first 7 out of 8 sentences have this word under. And over here we see it's this middle word, zire. But then 2 of them say paine. So, but they're both translated as under. So, is there any pattern there? Let's see, well, under the door, under the mountain, versus under the bed, under the table, bridge, sun and book. Don't see any clear difference there. You look for any kind of, maybe something that would be different in the meaning somehow. Are they living things? No, only the cat is living. The rest are all not living. So nothing immediately explains it. Notice here, you see here in the translations, they want you to, one of them has paine and one of them has zire. So already you're starting to get the idea that this idea of, paine and zire is telling that difference is going to be important here. And yeah, I don't immediately see that, see what that is. Interesting. There's also this interesting note here, fill the gaps. If you think some of them can be filled in more than one way, give all possible answers. That's a bit unusual. I mean, usually there's one answer they want. You don't say could be this or that. But that makes me think it may be this paine or zire thing. Okay. So you see, I'm always looking for ways into the pattern. And you know, if I get stuck, then I go back, I look for another way in. Okay, so here, you know, at first I was excited that I see under, and then I see a bunch of zires. So I thought, oh, zire is under. And so I was all happy about that. But then I saw the paine. So, well, and now, so then I look for the pattern. Well, how can I tell when's it zire, when's it paine? I don't know. I don't see the pattern there. So now I am going to look for another way in. So we can maybe look for maybe figuring out these nouns. Okay, so we look for a repeated noun. And so going from the beginning, there's only two, unless I missed one here, there's only two. There's only a single pair of repeating nouns, and that is book and book. And here you see the repeated part is kitab, kitab. And that may stand out, you know, like in linguistics when they're teaching like the special word structure of Arabic, they always use the example of kitab, meaning a book. And Persian is a language that, even though it's an Indo-European language, like English, it has a very large amount of Arabic vocabulary. And so you can see a kitab here. Clearly that means book. But even if you don't know that, you know it anyway, because you see both of these two lines have book and both of them have kitab. So this is clearly kitab. And this is clearly book. And so this also now gives you good information for the rest of these phrases, because now you know that this noun is at the end. Like so it matches the same order as you would get in English. So it is like the thing under the thing, the book. And so now this information is now enough to be able to know all the nouns, because right now we know that if this is, you know, so this must be the letter, like if this is under the book, but that means if this is under the sun, right, aftab, so that means shar here is the city, right? Dar, oh, interesting that the word dar is door, and I think that's actually a cognate. I'm just guessing, but I think that looks like an Indo-European cognate. So actually a word that's of the same origin, possibly, unless I'm just imagining that, because there can be false cognates, words that look similar, but then have no relation. But there it is, the word door. I think it is. Okay, so we now know what all the nouns are. So that's easy. Yeah, that's, you know, I thought it was going to be a whole thing to figure out all those nouns, but as soon as we see the repetition of the book and the book, now we know the order. And this thing, the lowest shelf in the bookcase, it seems like that's just one piece, because if this is book on something, unless the on the lowest shelf is somehow included here in this mystery word, it seems like this word is something like under, because you'd see it here under the door. It's not the lowest shelf of the door, the lowest shelf of the mountain. No, this is under. It's just a different word that is also translated as under. So if this is book under, the commode is going to be the lowest shelf in the bookcase. Somehow it gets its own word. Let's see, it seems like a funny example of something that we would see as being very specific. It's like a very specific thing, the lowest shelf of the bookcase. And yet it's going to get its own it's going to get its own word just for that. So that's a bit unusual. Okay. All right, so now we've reached the point where everything is clear. There's only one mystery left, and I guess it shouldn't sound so pleased because this really seems to be the central mystery, and it's the central problem. And I don't have the answer for it yet. I mean, although that's a big step just to get to the point where you're clear about what you don't know and like what you need to know. That's a big step. And the big step, the big thing remaining here is how do we tell when to use zire and when to use paine? Okay. So the only difference, I mean, these sentences are all of the same form. So we're looking for anything to be able to make a difference, to have these things somehow be different categories. They're all noun phrases of the same structure. They're all singular, like there's no issue of plural or anything like that. There could be something like gender, but we don't see any sign of any gender here. There's nothing that could give us any clue towards that. And we looked at animacy, which would be whether the thing is alive or not. That can often make a difference. But we see the only animate thing is the cat. So we need something that makes these paine sentences different from the zire phrases. Right? So that's what we need to identify. Now, the pattern could come from the left or from the right. The thing, whether it's a type of thing, right? The type of thing that you're describing the position of, or what you are describing as, the position. I would go as a first guess to what comes after, because these are preposition phrases. You see, this is a preposition. It's like in, on, of, at. And prepositions always come before a noun phrase. And they attach to that noun phrase. They connect that noun phrase. They're like, preposition is like a plug that plugs a noun phrase into the sentence in some way. In this case, it plugs it into another noun phrase. So you have the bed is a noun, and then under plugs it into the noun phrase the cat. So you end up with the cat under the bed. And so under the bed, under is describing the position of the bed, which is connected to cat. So this is about positioning, right? Under. There's something about under where Persian has two words in order to say what we would in English simply use the word under for both of them. So what's the difference between being under a bed and under a mountain? Under a table, okay, bridge, okay. So let's now make a list of each of the ones. So the zire list and the paine list. Okay, so we have the zires, we have bed, table, bridge, sun, book. And for paine, we have mountain, door, and then bookshelf case. Lowest shelf, or bookshelf case. It's bookcase shelf. Okay. I look at these two lists, I don't see any pattern. And okay, well, we could try again. We could do the same thing with the words that come before. So look for a pattern there. So this is like this is the after, right? And then the before. Zire. Okay, so we have cat, stool, boat. city and letter. And for Pine, we have house, package, and book. So it looks to me like this is all the information we can assemble. What else can we look for? I mean, we could look for the shape of the words here. We could look for, are there any kind of pieces? You notice this A ending is kind of separated with a hyphen here, suggesting that it's like a separate piece. We don't see any of that on any other words. We could look for something phonological, as in like a sound. Although it's hard to imagine how, like, you know, a different sound. Sometimes when you have words that end with a different sound, the next word will start with a slightly different sound to match, you know, the word that came before it. But it's hard to imagine how a simple sound difference could cause the difference between like a zire and pine, because they really sound like completely different words. It's not like they somehow changed the word in order to match a sound. It's just two completely different words. And that's what it really suggests, that the difference is something in the meaning. Two completely different words, and they're chosen based on the meaning, not based on some details of the sound. But we can look for any pattern in sound, like, you know, ending with a vowel versus a consonant. See, these are ending with vowels, these ends in consonants, but there's no pattern there. You see how it's mixed? Like here you have a vowel with zir, consonant with zir. And you have, now the pines all have consonants. No, here you have vowel with pine and consonant with pine. Okay, so nope. And then on the other side, okay, consonants, well, they all start with consonants, except here, okay, here's a vowel, different types, D, the pine, K, well, here you see a K. Well, I mean, it's clear here because you see a K with zire and a K with pine, and different vowels mixed. So it's all mixed together. And the last, so you know, I look for any kind of pattern in the sound that could explain zire versus pine, but I don't see it. So this one is really stumping me, because how can I tell the difference? How can I tell, like what do either of these lists? Basically, there has to be a pattern that separates either, you know, the before pattern or the after pattern. So I just like stare at these lists. I mean, this is like, you know, a big part of what when you're doing these puzzles, you get the information and you assemble it into a form that is, you know, very compact, where you can kind of like stare at the information all in like one piece, and where everything is laid out clearly, so you can, you know, to try to help you see the pattern, because you could see the pattern, you know, the pattern is there in all these sentences, but when you write it out like this, you can get a you know, a clearer, it's easier to see what's going on. Yeah, and so I'm now sad to say that for the first time in these tutorials on the sample problems, I am stumped. Yes, I must admit it. It's sad to admit, but I must admit that I am stumped, and I am not able to solve this problem. And so I turn to the solution. Yes, it's very sad to say. Okay, so I'm going to switch over to the solution. And here it is. What do we have? Look at this. Look at this. Can you believe it? Can you believe it? Zire is used when the upper item completely covers the lower one. Paine is used when the upper item doesn't cover the lower one completely, like the word below. So paine is like below, and only zire is like under. Wow. Okay. Is that something that I could even imagine? Let's see. So when you're under the bed, okay, the cat under the bed is completely covered. The stool under the table. The stool under the table is completely covered because it's under the table. Whereas I see here the solution, the stool at the table. So this one, okay, so here you have a sentence that is like, this is the sentence that is like the stool under the table, except they use paine instead. So let's take a look back here. And okay. Interesting. Okay, so here we see like this sentence, chahar paye zire mis. Here, chahar paye paine mis. So the difference here, this sentence is exactly like this one, except the difference is zire versus paine. So we'd have to understand the difference. Well, okay, we have two ways of saying a stool is under a table. And the difference is whether it's completely under, so we would translate, if you actually put this stool completely under a table, you could call it zire, or you call it under the table. But if you put the stool in a way where you're sitting at the table, so it's kind of at the edge of the table, partly covered by the table, then you call it paine, you'd say below the stool below the table, or in the suggested translation in the solution, the stool at the table. My. Okay, and then for the other pieces, the book. This one, we have another one that's similar. So the book on the lowest shelf in the bookcase, so that one is not completely covered by the bookcase. Whereas, because it's on the lowest shelf, it's below the bookcase. Ooh, but once again, that is a trick. I mean, would you really call the book on the lowest shelf of a bookcase the book below the bookcase? No. So that is really, really hard to imagine how that would even be gettable. And so, okay, under the book. So this one, as much it is embarrassing to, do a video where I'm doing a tutorial on how to solve the problem, and then I'm unable to solve the problem. But I consider this one, in my opinion, is a real stumper. This one is really not gettable by anyone, by any brain that I understand. It's not gettable with my brain, I gotta say. So this one is beyond my level. I can talk about the linguistics of it, the theory of it, but when it comes to actually seeing that pattern, the idea of being completely covered versus incompletely covered, that pattern to me, I don't see that at all. I mean, if you're a house under a mountain, okay, you're a house under a mountain. I guess that means something that you're not really under it. I was imagining it as like this some kind of cave or something, right? But I guess what they mean to say is that the house is below the mountain, and not that it's actually like inside it. Maybe you watch too much, like you get too much like fantasy, like Lord of the Rings or something. You imagine like a dwarf, the dwarves with their houses under the mountain. But here they're like, it's actually in the mountain, or like Moria or something. But here they're just imagining it as it's a house that is below a mountain. Okay. And then for the package under the door, the idea would be that the door does not completely cover the package. The lowest shelf in the bookcase, so the bookcase does not completely cover the book. Yeah. So this is one where even after I see the solution, I still find it hard to believe how I would be able to solve it. Often with these puzzles, once you see the solution, it's like, oh, it's so clear once you know the answer. That's usually how puzzles go. But I have to tip my hat to this one. This is listed as the easiest. This is on the easy level. But I think there's really quite a range when it comes to these puzzles. Sometimes the ones they think are easy are not. The ones they think are hard are not. And you'll see that as you go through. So with that, on that note, we complete our review of the easy set of International Linguistics Olympiad Sample Problems. And I'd love to hear in the comments if you were able to solve this problem, or if you know anybody who was able to solve the problem, if you could see that pattern. I would love to hear from you. I'd be very curious to learn how it is even possible to solve it. How it's possible to see that pattern. And if you were able to see that pattern, I think you may have a bright future in the Linguistics Olympiad.